Hey guys, and welcome to Geeking with Gideros. Today we are going to make an interactive button. So today's session is going to be pretty short. I just want to show you how to do one specific thing and how to put some nice little effects on it. We've got our project open here. Last time we did anything, we left with having a little fade in, and after it's completed, turning our circle to 0.1 alpha. Now the fade in had a 1 second delay, so when before it starts the screen would start off black, it would wait 1 second, fade in, and then take 2 seconds, and then once done 0.1 alpha. Now I've added a little bit of code here, so I'm going to uncomment it and explain what it does. So basically we've got self.onTouch equals function target comma event. So you can use onTouch or you can use mouse events. If you use, I think either one of them, I think they work interchangeably, but I just like using onTouch because actually, I could be wrong. I think that if you use mouse events, and I'll check this out, but I think if you use mouse events, they won't work on devices. Whereas if you use touch, I think they will work on devices and desktops. So touch events will convert to mouse events as well. So if you are running this on desktop, touch will work also. So basically you are adding this, you're making a function, an onTouch function for this is pretty much a generic function that could be added to any circle that I put on screen. Now it is a property of this menu scene, okay, this initialize function. So it belongs to the init function, and because we're doing self, we will be able to access it from other functions if we set up some down here and stuff. Now, because I put target and I'm passing the target into the function, I can attach this to any sprite I create and it will work on that sprite. That's why we're passing the target property in. The event property, that's to make sure that it picks up our X and Y coordinates of the touch. So it tests. When we click, it tests for where we're clicking, and if it is inside this circle, it is going to set the scale of the circle to 75%, and we are going to tween it. So first we're going to take this line out, and I'm just going to save, and I'm going to play. And if you see, when I click, it is just going to make it 75%. Nothing else happens. Now, if I click again, because I'm changing it to a hard-coded property of 75, it is always going to be setting it to 75. So it's already there, so nothing's happening, okay? Now, if I told it to make it smaller by an increment, for example, it takes the size it is currently and then subtracts something from that, then it will get smaller every time you click, okay? But we don't need it for a button. For a button, we would need something like this. We're gonna take this line out, and as you see, what I'm doing here is I'm tweening the circle back into its original scale X and scale Y over a quarter of a second. Now there is going to be a 0.1 delay, 0.1 second delay, just to make sure that we see the button get smaller first. And then we're also tweening this with a elastic easing mode, okay? So it's going to have a nice little bounce effect. So it's going to get smaller and then bounce in very quickly, almost like an elastic band. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, let it fade in. We click and you see that little bouncing effect. If you slow it down, you'll see it a little bit better. So we're going to make it over 1 second and reload. So that's much slower. there's a little bit of a delay before the tween finishes. So if you click before that, nothing's happening. But for our button, we don't need to worry about it right now, because we're going to be disabling this button as soon as we press it, which is the next line. The next line, we're basically telling it to take the listener that we created and remove it, okay? So this is our function. Once that function is written, over here, we've got our circle, okay? This is where we set the circle up, and it's called self.bmp. And we're adding the listener to it. It is on begin touches. So when you push the screen, touch the screen, that's when it's listening. And here you putting the function in. This is our function, self.onTouch, and this is the object itself again, okay? So, really simple. If you want to remove the event listener, you do exactly the same thing, but instead of putting in add event listener, you remove event listener. In this case, because you could be adding this to multiple objects, so we could have a self.bmp2, self.bmp3, etc. You can put target.remove event listener, because you would have added it to all these different circles, and then when you click on the different circles, it would know which one you're clicking on and remove the event listener from the appropriate one. So that's a really useful way not to have to write 5 functions for 5 different sprites, and instead you have to write one, and yeah, it works nicely. So what's going to happen now if I reload is, as soon as I click the sprite, it is going to become unresponsive. So this is exactly what we want, because let's say this is a start or play game button. Once you click the play button, you don't want the player to be able to click it again, okay? You want the scene to change, and then you might want to go back, do something else, etc. But most of the time, once you've clicked play, the fade in is going to or the fade out is going to happen, the crossfade to the next scene, whatever you're doing, and that is sort of like no man's land. Once you've done that, there is a transition going on, and buttons are not interactive. So you definitely want that behavior, otherwise things can go a bit funny. So you do that. Once you go into the next scene, there could be a back button to take you back to the menu. Now this sort of stuff happens really quickly. Normally you wouldn't have a super slow transition on this or a tween, and instead it would be something like 0.25 like I did before. And I'm just going to take this away again, and we're going to reload. And as you see now, it's a lot quicker. Okay, so that is one particular tweening mode you can use, easing mode. The other ones are things like out back, which is very similar. You make it small first by setting the scale, and then what happens, it goes back to its original size by getting big and then coming back. Okay, so I'll show you what that looks like over 1 second. So as you see, it gets a little bit bigger before it settles down on its original size, okay? The other ones you've got are things like outbounds. You can also have inbounds, but in this case we don't want that, because we are trying to imagine if you were doing something like inbounds, what would happen is when you click, you make this sprite small first by going setting its its scale to 0.75, and then what would happen, it would get even smaller and then go back to its original size. Okay, so for what we're doing here, this works much better, it looks nicer. Okay, so you definitely want to use out back or out elastic instead of in elastic. Okay, So the other one is outbounds. That also looks very nice for some, in some cases. You can test all these out yourselves, guys. There is a lot of different tweening modes, but the ones I use mostly are bounce, elastic, and back, and linear. And then there's just the simple quadratic quad in out. That is just you know, speed up and slow down, or slow and then finish fast. There are different modes where, you know, you could have let's say you have a car and you want to tween it from point A to B, and you would do something like quad in and out to have it slow, speed up, and slow down. Okay, if you did quad in only, then you would have slow, speed up, and just get to its final destination. If you did quad out, you would have fast and slow down. Okay, so there are different ways of using these. They're basically animation principles. So if you're gonna look a little bit deeper into this, have a look at animation principles, and you guys will learn a lot about this. It makes things look very nice, and you can use this for not just buttons, but actual animating characters and elements on screen, and it just makes things look really good. So what did we do here? Outbounds. Let's just test this out. So we save and see what that looks like over 1 second. See, that's a bouncing effect. So you could do this effect from point A to point B. Let's say you drop the ball down here, and then what would happen? It would go bang, bang, bang. So here we're obviously doing the scale. You can also do position property. You can do alpha. You can do all sorts. Okay, so that bounce effect will happen in all those scenarios. So if you're doing position, it will come back a little bit. Okay, if you're doing alpha, it will make it a little bit more transparent or less transparent depending where you're going from. Okay, so all these have their uses, and they can be very useful and make things look quite interesting if you use them in the right combination. So as you see, this is a really simple way of making a button interactive. Now what we need to do or want to do next is create some sort of almost like a little shell where we've got a menu and a level, and you can go back. So we want to add a couple more buttons. I think it might be time to start adding some proper graphics, actually making this a play button so we can turn it into a little game. So probably next week I'm going to load up a nice play button to replace the circle, and we're gonna go into another scene, and possibly that scene will put a little back button in the top corner or something, top left corner, that takes you back if you want to quit the game, something along those lines. And what we also want to do, this is one thing that we neglected, or I neglected to talk about, is that here currently, as soon as I click the button, even while it's transitioning, it is still you can still interact with it. Okay, but there are a lot of cases where you don't want that to happen. So what I would do in my case is not have, in my game I wouldn't have the transition or the fade in take so long, and I would take this line here and I would paste it into the onComplete function. Okay, so instead of having it interactive immediately, I would wait until the fade in has finished. So let's not let's take that alpha thing out that we did last time, because we don't really need that. It was just an example, and instead we'll add the listener. Okay, so let's save that and click play again. See what happens. Okay, so let's try that again, because I kind of forgot to click when I was supposed to. Nothing, 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 and now as soon as it's faded in, it works. So that's exactly how you want to set up your buttons. Okay, you want to limit when they're clickable. It's better design, I think, especially if you keep things snappy. You don't have to have super long fades in and out, but it just makes things look nicer if you disable certain things at certain times, just to make sure things run well and present well. Okay, so as we get a little bit deeper into this, you will see where these things really apply. Hopefully this was really useful for you guys, and I will, as I said before, we will take this a little bit further next time and see if we can make those interactive scenes going back and forth and stuff like that. Cool. I will see you guys next time.